everyone, it's Mangino. Welcome to the Mangino Talks Pittsburgh podcast. I've been a radio talk show host for half of my life, and nearly half of that here in Pittsburgh. And so my podcast, we talk about things Pittsburgh, everything that matters to us all, from current events to Pittsburgh history, social issues to sports, politics, to practical day-to-day life. And today we are talking once again about the issue of abortion. In the previous episode, we talked about it from the standpoint of the National Right to Life and their conference that they had downtown Pittsburgh over the weekend and what they're facing moving forward, and a lot generally regarding the issue of abortion. And I don't want to go back and rehash and repeat all of that. You're welcome to go back and listen to it. And it's only about 20, 25 minutes long or so. But what I want to focus on in this episode is a companion story that was in the Post-Gazette regarding the impact of abortion and the issue and the decision of Dobbs and how it brought the end of Roe v. Wade and what it will mean for the Senate race with Bob Casey seeking a fourth term, and whether or not David McCormick, who seems as though the only Republican of any consideration that has the potential for legitimately challenging him. No one else is in the mix. Nobody. Doug Mastriano decided not to run for the U.S. Senate. Great decision for him, personally. A great decision ultimately for David McCormick as well, if he decides to run, to avoid any kind of Republican primary battle at this point, because like I said, nobody else is even thinking about it. The issue then becomes McCormick and his stance on abortion, and to what extent is it lined up with the people of Pennsylvania? And will he be able to win a general election against a pro-life Democrat? So initially you think, okay, the abortion issue isn't going to do all that much when it comes to the Senate race because Casey's pro-life, McCormick's pro-life. What's it going to matter? Well, it's interesting. Democrats, although Casey is pro-life, he's kind of in their camp at least a little, and enough to where they're feeling pretty good about the idea that he would not vote for any kind of a law that would further limit abortion and its availability across the country. They refer to it as a ban. It's not a ban, and I'll explain a little bit later on why it's not a ban that's being talked about most often in Washington. We'll get to that a little bit later on. What's happening right now are ads that are being run where McCormick is shown to only support abortion for the exception of a mother's life being threatened. And he refers to it as in the very rare instances. And they put this in quotes. And I guess maybe in some ways to just draw attention to it. Okay, fine. But when it comes to a mother's life being in jeopardy, it isn't a common issue. It is rare. Now, not as rare as incest and rape that occur at about 1.5% of all abortions that occur, but it is still rare. It's closer to like 10, 12, maybe as high as 15% of abortions that do occur in the country are tied into a woman's life being threatened, and also the health of the mom, generally speaking, and the health of the baby. Now, obviously, nobody is concerned about ending the baby's life because the baby's healthy. No, the idea is that do you terminate the unborn because they're ill enough to where they probably won't survive maybe the pregnancy? They may not survive shortly after birth. There's concern about whether or not people would choose an abortion for a baby that otherwise isn't completely healthy and may have some health issues down the road, maybe a lifelong illness or what's the word I'm looking for? Chronic condition. And so the abortion would then take place. But you're still talking about maybe 10, 15% of abortions there. And so in an ad released last Thursday, to mark the one-year anniversary of the Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade, the state Democratic Party used a clip from a debate where McCormick, in a primary debate, said that he only supports abortion, and the exception would be in the very rare instances when a mother's life is threatened. And the ad says that McCormick backs banning abortion with no exceptions for rape or incest. Now, his spokesperson comes out and says, oh, no. McCormick is okay with those exceptions too. Well, according to this story in the Post-Gazette, there isn't a source to be discovered of McCormick saying this or having it put on a website, a piece of literature. There isn't an occurrence of him saying that at a news conference, at a rally, at a debate stage. Democrats cite several news outlets over the last year, including the Post-Gazette mentioning McCormick and his support only for exceptions when a mother's life is at risk. The McCormick camp, they cited a May 2022 primary voter guide from LifePak, a pro-life group, and they had what they refer to as a personal meeting between the organization and McCormick, and Jim Ludwig, chairman of LifePak's board of directors, said in that meeting that McCormick gave the exceptions for rape, incest, and the life of the mother. And so there's legitimacy to the claim that McCormick really doesn't have the view of there should be more exceptions than just the life of the mother. And for people who would have that as a concern, I think it's a legitimate one. I think it is. In my mind, it's an automatic for the life of the mother, an absolute automatic. It is tragic when you watch the news stories of women around the country in states that have brought down great limitations on the issue of abortion, so much so that doctors are afraid of being prosecuted if they were to perform an abortion, to where they just stop practicing. And women who are pregnant, who have health complications, are needing to travel hours and hours and hours in order to get the care, if they can find the care to get an abortion to save their own life. Now, in the philosophical argument of you have mom and she's pregnant, right? And the medical professionals say that your life is being threatened. And what we know from all of our years of experience, that although your life is not threatened in the moment when you are at this stage in your pregnancy, where things are progressing, you are only going to get worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And so with that, we recommend you end the pregnancy now and not have to get to that point. Well, doctors aren't performing the abortions then. They're saying, no, I don't want to touch this because I don't want to go to jail over this, right? And I don't blame them. Who can blame them? And so you tell moms that they have to get near death in order to get the care that they need. That doesn't make sense to me. I can, in clean conscience, defer that to a decision between a woman and her doctor for her health care decisions, because it is her health, her care, and her doctor's decision. I get that. Because if you run the risk of losing mom, then you're going to run the risk of losing the baby too. How is that being pro-life, that you're willing to let two people die? But if you can ensure the life of the one, then at least you're saving one. And for women who go and get an abortion that is medically necessary, they wanted the baby. They're distraught that they have to terminate the pregnancy. It's akin to a miscarriage. They want the baby so desperately. The whole family does. And so this issue of making that exception is of paramount importance. And on the issue of rape and incest, it's estimated, according to studies, that about 1.5% of all abortions occur because of rape and incest. 1.5%. Some people say, well, if you're going to leave that as a provision, then we're talking about crimes. The mother ought to and must be required to file a criminal complaint. Most women who are sexually assaulted do not file criminal complaints. Most do not go to the hospital after being raped. Most do not file charges. Most do not go through a criminal prosecution. At every stage of this, fewer and fewer women engage in the process because they know what's going to come. They're going to be humiliated. They're going to be vilified. They are going to experience a character assassination in the process, as unjust as that is in our criminal justice system, but it's going to happen. And so women decide, I'm going to do my best to forget about it and just move forward. A horrible commentary on our system and how we treat women who are sexually violated. To then require that of a woman that becomes pregnant as a result of that sexual violation, I'm not willing to put a woman through that. I'm not willing to. But what about women who will then claim that they were sexually violated in order to be able to have the abortion that they otherwise want? Here's what I know for sure. You are not going to stop every single abortion by banning abortions. It's not going to happen, is it? Prior to Roe v. Wade, there were abortions. They called them back alley abortions, right? Women are going to seek it out anyway. What we have a responsibility to do is what we reasonably can do to protect the unborn child's life, to do all that we reasonably can to ensure that that life is protected. And ultimately, if the mother is willing to lie about it, for those of us who are pro-life and we have a religious reason for why we're pro-life, then they are going to ultimately be responsible for the decisions that they make. Not me. Not me. And besides, if I can get to the point to where we're able to save 90, 95, 98% of children's lives in the process by leaving that provision for the sake of the 98% that will have life that otherwise will not, I'd do it. I'd do it. Also, on this issue of the campaign for 2022 and the U.S. Senate race, McCormick deciding whether or not he's going to run, unsure about the process at this point. Republicans kind of happy about the idea that Doug Mastriano, Republican from Franklin, has decided he's not going to run. In fact, most Republicans are thrilled. Now, granted, there's that pocket that back him that are disappointed, but most Republicans are thrilled about this. Because if McCormick gets in, he's not going to have any real challenger. It's going to save a lot of money for the general election. He's not going to be put in many positions to have to say things, to have to court to the right, where he has to worry about coming back to the middle in a general election. It's just a good thing all the way around. Doug Mastriano deciding not to run was a great decision for Doug Mastriano, because Doug Mastriano would have been humiliated if he ran. He would have lost embarrassingly. The only way that he was able to win the Republican nomination for governor is because Republicans thought in too great a numbers that they had a legitimate chance of winning when they clearly should have known early on their chance was slim and none, winning the primary, the nomination. So by staying in for as long as they did, they made it possible that Doug Mastriano, with the minority support within the Republican Party, was able to gain the nomination for governor. Well, there's no way he's going to do that if he runs against McCormick. If there's only one other legitimate contender, it's over. He has no chance. He also knows that he has no chance in a general election either, that even if McCormick didn't get in and it was just Doug Mastriano running by himself in the primary and he wins the nomination, he will lose embarrassingly so. It'll be just as humiliating as it was with his defeat against Governor Shapiro to go up against Bob Casey, three-time incumbent. Come on. There's also another issue when it comes to McCormick and his uncertainty about what he's going to do moving forward, and it's what's happening with Trump. And I think this is probably even a bigger issue than where he stands on abortion. I think the number one issue McCormick is trying to weigh here about whether or not to get in is what happens with Trump. And the more popular that Trump has become within the Republican Party, he's able to maintain his support within the party. Some polls say maybe even increasing that support, right, is another reason why McCormick is not going to run. Because if Trump wins the nomination, and it looks as though he's going to, he is going to be, what's the word he liked to use in a recent social media post? Decimated. He will be decimated by Biden in 2024. I mean, not even close. Not even close. There is no way that moderate Democrats, that independent voters, and moderate Republicans are going to vote in any numbers in swing states like Pennsylvania for Donald Trump. Can you imagine you're McCormick, you're trying to win this Senate seat, and then you're stuck with, okay, do I go campaign with this guy who's facing criminal prosecution at the federal level for his handling of classified documents and his unwillingness to participate and turn over the documents he otherwise had no right to have and denied a grand jury's request for those documents? You going to go campaign with this guy? And then, let alone, we haven't heard what's going to happen with the J6 investigation or in Georgia. McCormick doesn't want to run with that. Now, if somebody else were to win the Republican nomination or look as though they can really challenge and be victorious, right? DeSantis. If DeSantis was leading in the polls for the presidency, McCormick's in already. He's already in. But here's another thing to think about. If McCormick doesn't campaign with Trump, he has no chance because Republicans won't back him if he's viewed as one who's not going to back the party nominee. He's in a lose-lose situation, and I think at this point he has better things to do with his life than be a loser. Spend a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of energy to do nothing more than lose a U.S. Senate race. I just don't see it happening. I just don't. One of the things being discussed in Washington is the possibility of some type of federal law that would limit access to abortion. And even though Bob Casey's view is a pro-life one, he is opposed to the idea of legislation that would greatly curtail the access to abortion around the country. And so on the federal side, there's talk about the possibility of a 15-week limit, a cap, if you will. It's oftentimes referred to as a ban, a 15-week ban on abortion. What's interesting is that we have a ban on abortion in Pennsylvania. Once again, citing the story here in the Post-Gazette, abortion is legal through the 23rd week of pregnancy. Let me ask you this. If we were to reduce it down to 15, that would be referred to as a ban. Then why don't we refer to the 23rd week limit as a ban? We don't. Why don't we? No, I think we refer to the 15-week as a ban because it's something that can get people wound up about. But if any time limit is referred to as a ban because you're not letting access take place whenever and however, then Pennsylvania has a ban because ours is 23 weeks and only longer if the mother faces health risks. That's it. That's it. And so, Maddie McDaniel, state Democratic Party spokesperson, tweeted out last week that the abortion policy issue will be a major general election problem for David McCormick. It could be. Maeve Coyle, spokesperson for Senate Democrats' campaign arm, said Pennsylvanians can roll the tape and see the real David McCormick for themselves, that for over a year, McCormick has made it clear that he can't be trusted to protect women's right to make their own health care decisions. Well, he is in favor of women making their own health care decisions. That's the exception he's in favor of. The argument that abortion is health care when it's really birth control is disingenuous, to say the least. This isn't health care. Terminating the life of an unborn child because of the inconvenient timing of a pregnancy is not health care. And as I talked about in my episode yesterday, it's no more justifiable to terminate a baby that's already been born to end that child's life because of the inconvenience. We'd all be horrified. But if the unborn isn't breathing air yet, okay, that's okay. All of a sudden, it is justified. But back to the issue of health care, David McCormick is in favor of women having the health care that they need and has no interest in getting involved in their health care decisions. Democrats think that they have a winning issue here, but it's an interesting one. What many people don't realize is that Americans do not support abortion on demand as many pro-abortionists would like to portray. Now, granted, recent poll out by CBS says 60% of Americans say the Dobbs decision was bad for the country, and that's true. I'm not disputing that poll. However, there's also another poll that's very interesting. A Gallup poll taken in March found that while 69% of Americans said abortion should be legal during the first 3 months of pregnancy, that percentage drops. It plummets to just 37% in the second trimester, 22% in the last trimester. So think about this. The majority of the American people are clearly behind the idea of putting in place a 15-week limit that if you're going to get an abortion, it has to be in the first trimester. Only 37% support an abortion after that, outside of a mother's life being at risk. They're saying if you're going to get it done quick at least. That first trimester is only 13 weeks. Republicans in Congress are saying, listen, we'll give you the 13 plus 2 more. The majority of Americans back that idea. Republican National Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel said in April that her party needs to be ready to talk about abortion. You have to address this issue head on. Put Democrats on the defensive and articulate where you stand. And that's going to be the critical message we have to get out before 2024. And what they need is a reasonable argument. And here's the reasonable argument. This is a winner in 2024. You allow for exceptions for rape, incest, and the life of the mother, okay? And you focus on that 15-week limit, and you'll have the majority support of the American people. If you start talking about wanting to go more extreme than that, then you're not going to have the support of the American people, and then you're not going to accomplish the goal of preserving unborn life. Ultimately, decide for yourself. You know, what's interesting is an argument that was made by Casey about why it is that he's taken the position he has in his opposition to the Dobbs decision. And according to the story here in the Post-Gazette, says Casey, a Catholic who personally opposes abortion, is one of the few Democrats who have supported some legislation to restrict access, including a ban on most abortions after 20 weeks of pregnancy. But he hammered the Dobbs decision last year, saying, quote, it upends almost a half a century of legal precedent and rips away a constitutional right that generations of women have known their entire lives. That is the most ridiculous argument that anybody could possibly put out for why they are upset about a decision being made. Legal precedent? Think about what he said. Upends almost a half a century of legal precedent and rips away a constitutional right that generations of women have known their entire lives. Do you realize that by the legal decisions that have been made that have granted individuals freedoms like the 14th Amendment, citizenship status, the right to vote, the constitutional Supreme Court rulings backing that ability to vote, all of that upended legal precedent that had gone on not for 50 years, at least 100 years, 150 years, almost 200 years, if not more, with some recent Supreme Court decisions. And you go all the way back to the beginnings of this, not only the country, but the colonies. The idea of saying, you know, we've always done it this way, and now you're telling people we can't continue doing it this way. Don't you think we ought to continue doing it that way just because we always have, no matter how bad it was in the first place? Nonsensical. If something is wrong, then overturning it after a period of time, it doesn't all of a sudden make it right. So if we had something that was occurring that was horrible, and I would argue that abortion on demand for birth control purposes is horrible, that if it lasts long enough, you know what, we just have to keep it in place. Really? Maybe we should have kept slavery in place. Same argument, right? Isn't it? How is it not? Just because people had a constitutional right to own people as property? Well, you know, we've been doing it like this for over 100 years. I mean, how do we change all of this now? No, it's ridiculous. It's absurd. Absolutely absurd. You know, we've had this whole separate but equal. And can't we just keep on with the separate but equal? We've been doing it for a really long time. No, you can't keep on doing that. It's a ridiculous argument, but he decided to make it anyway. And I don't understand. I really don't get it. I mean, he's obviously playing the politics. I don't believe he truly believes this. He's too smart to really believe this. But he's trying to play both sides of the fence. He realizes that politically, he's a Democrat, and he's a Democrat for reasons outside of the pro-life movement because he's very much pro-life, and he supports other limitations. But he also knows that once you decide to get into a party and you become a major player in that party, U.S. Senator or one who would run for U.S. Senate, you are stuck defending all that the party subscribes to. And you have to come up with a way of defending it. Because if not, then the party will find somebody else to represent it. And that's where he is right now. He knows that he's pro-life. He knows he has that core conviction. And he has to turn to absurdities in order to sound as though he's being supportive to those who are upset about the overturning of Roe v. Wade. So moving forward on this Senate race, I'm going to predict that McCormick will not get into this race, barring a major development with Trump. And even with that, it's going to make it very difficult. Bob Casey is one who is viewed as a moderate Democrat. It's going to be very difficult to peel support away from him to go to a challenger. It may be easier for McCormick to wait a few more years and say, you know what, I'm going to challenge either Fetterman in the U.S. Senate. Prior to that, maybe challenge Shapiro for governor. But the way that he's rolling right now, I don't see that happening anytime soon either. I just don't see anybody legitimately putting up a major pushback to Shapiro right now. Unless at some point he goes off the rails. I just don't see that happening. He's too well buttoned up, too tight on this, too tight. So will McCormick ever have to really address the issue of abortion? No, because I don't think he's ever going to actually throw his hat into the ring. I may be surprised. I just don't think it's going to happen. I'm Mangino. I want to thank you for listening to the show, Mangino Talks Podcast. Please be sure to click the subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. For more on me and the show, be sure to visit ManginoTalks.com. If there's a topic you would like me to talk about or a guest that you would like me to have on, just send me an email at Mangino@ManginoTalks.com. Follow me on your favorite social media platform by using @ManginoTalks. And once you find me, please like, follow, subscribe, and share the pages with your friends and your family. And thanks once again for listening to the Mangino Talks Podcast.